Okay, now that we've talked about identifying functions, let's talk about comparing functions. And there is something I want you to know before we ever get started. When we're talking about the word range, we are looking at y, and when we are talking about the word domain, we are looking at x. We're not going to use that a lot right now, but I want you to have it in your mind so that you understand what they're talking about when you see those words. If you look at these notes, these are just another way to find slope and y-intercept. We've been working on that for a while now, so we all know how to do it. If you have any questions, you can go back to this. It gives you the slope-intercept form, and it shows you how to find the y-intercept and the slope. Okay, I want to look here. Now, when we're talking about comparing functions, I don't want to get you confused and I don't want you to freak out, because what they do is they go and they change a little bit so that they can name the function. Okay, so we're going to change this up a little bit, and we're going to look here. If you look right here, that f and that x, the way we say that is f of x. And what that is going to do is it's going to name this function. And then here we have g of x, and it's going to name this function. And if you notice, both of those are sitting in the place where we normally have y. So don't freak out. They're not doing anything except naming a function. It still pretty much is our y. We're going to use the same concept and to find our slope and our y-intercept, and then we're just going to compare the two functions. So if I look at the first one, which is this one right here, it says slope of f. Since this is named f, we're going to look at this equation, and as you know, our slope is our m, so it is -1/2. Y-intercept is our b, and that's what it's looking for here. Our b is right here, and it is -2. Okay? Not hard. Same thing we've been doing all along. If I take this table and I put it into the calculator under Stat Edit, when I'm done, my m comes out to be -1.5. Or we could say -3/2, because those are the same, and that is easier to graph. And then my y-intercept of g, which is this table, is 1. Okay, I want to look at something real quick, and that's going to mean that I have to turn the paper over, but that's okay. We're going to do that. I want to go back here, and I want you to ignore this line. I just want to use this because it has a table. And I want to graph these two. I'm going to start right here at -2 for f of x, and I'm going to go down 1 and over 2. And I'm going to draw the straightest line I can draw. And I'm going to call this f of x. Okay? See if I can get that straight for you. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the second line. I'm going to go up here at 1 because that's my y-intercept. My slope is -3/2, so I'm going to say down 1, 2, 3 over 2. Okay, and I'm going to draw a line. And we're going to call that g of x. Okay, if you look at those two, I need to find a way to compare those two functions. And if I look at these two lines, if I look at g of x, that line is steeper than f of x. And the slope was bigger. So what that tells me is, and this is a way to compare, g of x has a steeper slope than f of x. And so what I can assume by looking at that is that if g of x has a steeper slope than f of x, the bigger the number, the steeper the slope. So that's what I would assume by looking at that. There are a couple of different things that you could use to describe. but in this case, slope is certainly the easiest. Okay, let's look here. Here, our f of x is an equation, and our g of x is this graph over here. Okay? So we are going to find the slope and y-intercept. Slope of an equation is easy, it's just 6. Y-intercept is easy, -1. Equations are the easiest one to find it out of. If I look at this graph, I'm going to find the y-intercept first because that's easiest for me. Y-intercept is 0. And then I'm going to put my dots, put my points in here. And I'm going to use rise over run. And I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3. I'm going to run 1. Rise over run would be 3 over 1. It is a negative slope. So I'm going to say -3. Okay, and one of the ways that we talked about describing this in class that you guys came up with was f of x has a positive slope while g of x has a negative slope. And this can be described in several ways. You could have said f of x has a y-intercept of -1, therefore it is non-proportional, while g of x has a y-intercept of 0, therefore it is proportional. There's all kinds of ways that you can describe this data, but we need these, f of x and g of x, so that we know which data we're talking about. That is all there is to comparing functions. If you have any questions, please come see me during tutoring.